If you want to write stories your readers will love, there are 3 things you need to do. Understand storytelling principles, see how other writers have applied those principles, and then use them in your own work. Here on the Story Nerd podcast, our goal is to demystify story theory. We'll help you with those first 2 steps so that you can get started with the third. My name is Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without the frustration.
And I'm Melanie Hill, writer, editor, and poet, and I help writers find solutions to their story problems so that they can finish their novels.
On today's episode, Melanie pitched Crazy Stupid Love so that we can study tension. This 2011 film was directed by Glenn Ficarra and John Requa from a screenplay by Dan Fogelman. Of course, there will be spoilers, as always, because we can't talk about the movie without talking about the movie. And please help other writers find our show by leaving a rating and review. Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it right from your phone. Just go to the show's landing page, scroll to the bottom, click the 5 stars, and you're done. All right, Melanie, Crazy Stupid Love. How did you go this week with your study of tension?
Well, do you know, I was surprised by how much tension is in this story and how layered it is. And I think that I chose it for a reason, but it was even better in terms of the example of story theory that I'm looking at, which is how to create tension. So it was actually a bit of a feast of tension, and I thought it was really well done. And I was surprised. So it's a nice, pleasant surprise to have. But before I go on and do the analysis, I just want to recap on how I'm looking at tension this season. So firstly, tension is the expectation that something is going to happen. And the more unpredictable the outcome, then the more tension that's created. Now, there are 2 sort of types of tension that I'm looking at, although I imagine this is on a spectrum, right? So I'm just looking at low tension that happens over a long time, and also high tension that is shorter and more intense. All right, now I also have a theory that the high or low types of tension are created to suit the unit of story that we're looking at. So generally, I think this theory or this kind of idea holds. So it's also very clear in Crazy Stupid Love that this sort of tension at the different layers of story also overlaps. And I thought that Crazy Stupid Love was a very good example of how that actually works and how you can layer in some of those elements of tension in your story. And I would just add in there very quickly that tension is not conflict. Tension is just that expectation that something's going to happen. Now, of course, when you get conflict, that adds to the tension, especially it creates unpredictability and a few other things. But at the moment, I'm not looking at conflict. I'm just looking at tension. All right, so the longer tension pieces in Crazy Stupid Love are a good example of that is when Cal and Emily break up. Right? Cal refuses to discuss their relationship and what went wrong. And this very simple scenario establishes an expectation that at some point Cal will speak to Emily about what he thinks and feels when or what he thought and felt when Emily requested the divorce. And not only did she request a divorce, but she confessed to having an affair with David Lindhagen, who is a guy that she works with. Now, so that's a very clear, longer, slower burn piece of tension. And then lo and behold, 55 minutes later in the movie, Cal tells Emily that he is upset and angry at her and himself. Now, there are multiple lines of slow burn tension that run in parallel in Cal and Emily's storyline, including a confrontation with David Lindhagen at the 90-minute mark of the movie. Now, we shouldn't be surprised by this. Like, I think that beginning piece where Emily confesses to the affair probably sets up some sort of expectation that David Lindhagen is coming into the story and that there will be a point of conflict. And it's a love story, and there's usually love triangles, right? So that makes sense. But it's a really clear and simple example of how tension is established, that long, slow burn tension is established and then held throughout the story even if you're not thinking about it. So you may think about it when it happens, but then forget about it as other things happen in the movie. And then when that incident occurs, you go, yes, of course. And it's like the relief of tension that you feel when Cal throws a punch at David Lindhagen is something that's actually been set up and that you've been carrying with you for the whole of the movie. Now, the other long tension line established by the opening is, will Cal and Emily get back together, right? This question I don't think is fully resolved by the ending, but it is a positive. I think the movie ends, it looks positive for Cal and Emily, right, by the time the movie finishes. And what I love about this question is that Cal's actions and his decisions throughout the storyline create enormous uncertainty around the answer to that question. And this is because Cal makes stupid decisions, right? His decisions shift him away from what he wants, and he puts that at risk. Now, having your characters make stupid decisions is a great way to increase tension. And Crazy Stupid Love has small and big examples of Cal's stupid decisions, right? And one of the first is when he throws himself out of the car, right? That's a really unexpected thing that he does at the beginning. And it shows exactly how Emily's request for a divorce has impacted him. And this one small act also sets up Cal's character, and it sets him up for making dumb decisions, and he makes a lot of them. And it's also a really good example of how that one act creates a level of uncertainty and also tension, because we kind of don't know really what Cal's going to do or how he's going to respond to things that happen throughout the story. The other stupid decisions that Hal makes include going along with Jacob's crazy view in life, which gets Cal into all sorts of trouble, including a run-in with one of the ladies he slept with, who also happens to be his son's teacher. Now, I want to use this example with Kate, the teacher, to show how tension works. Now, of course, Cal and Kate spend a night together, and as Kate leaves, she says, "Promise to call me." Cal says yes, but we all know that Cal will not call her. We also guess or expect that this will come back to haunt him, and it does at the most inopportune moment. So now we skip forward to parent-teacher night. Emily and Cal spend a few beautiful minutes confessing that they miss each other while waiting outside their son's classroom. And we start to think, could this be the start of their reconciliation? And then the teacher opens the door, and it's Kate. Kate is not happy to see Cal, and she is going to make him pay for not calling her. Now, this pays off the tension created when Kate leaves Cal's apartment, but it also creates more tension because Emily, after a sweet moment with Cal, is about to discover what Cal's been up to as a single guy. And what he's been doing and his confession to Emily don't match. So when he confesses that he misses her and loves her, and then she finds out that he has slept with 9 women while they've been apart, we are watching this scene play out and then starting to wonder what Kate will say and also how Cal will react. And then what will Emily do? So the amount of tension created in that scene is really quite interesting, and it sets up the ending, I suppose, because it kind of happens in the middle of the movie. Now, this scene is also a good example of how secrets and dramatic irony create tension. Each character has information that they don't want the other character to know, and we, as the audience, know most of it. However, Cal's secret about Kate is the information that he doesn't want revealed to Emily. And it's really interesting to see how these secrets pay off and how we as the audience know all of the secrets and what that does in terms of our levels of tension that we feel. Like it really raises our expectation that something that's not going to push Cal forward is going to happen. Now, other secrets in the movie that create tension are that Jessica, the babysitter, like the family's babysitter, has a crush on Cal. And to try and entice him to kind of be interested in her, she's taken nude photos, right? And this is a secret for everyone, if we think about it in terms of the story. And the only people it's not a secret to is obviously Jessica and also the audience. So it's really interesting to see how that secret's created. And then there's Cal and Emily's son, Robbie, who has a crush on Jessica. So imagine, like, we know that Jessica has a crush on Cal, and we also probably predict that that is going to come to a head at some stage. And we also know that Emily is actually dating David Lindhagen, although that's not really a massive secret, but it does play out kind of in that scene with Kate where she kind of denies, that she's kind of, maybe she's not seeing David really, but she is. And it comes to fruition, I think, in that endings, that climactic moment when there's the face-off. Now, if you watch how these secrets create tension, it is largely due to dramatic irony. And the beauty of secrets is that they are simple and that they are easy to set up. So when secrets are set up and shown on screen, we expect them to be revealed at some point. And I think that's the beauty of their simplicity. We don't have to know when, and we don't have to know how they'll be revealed, but that is how the tension is created. And that is the impact that secrets have on the story. And that is uncertainty right there, because that's what good tension does. It creates uncertainty, or it magnifies the uncertainty. Now, it's not just one secret in Crazy Stupid Love. It is many secrets overlapping that builds the tension. And I really like the way that the story has layered that in at all levels. And I think from a tension point of view, it is a really good example as a movie of how to create tension, but also other techniques, tension techniques are used as well. Now, tension is also built in this movie into small things. So, for example, Jacob slaps Cal a few times at the beginning when they go shopping together to make a point. Now, it's pretty obvious that Cal will slap Jacob back at some stage in the movie, but we don't know when and we don't know under what circumstances. And again, there's an expectation that something will happen and uncertainty around the circumstances when Cal will deliver the slap. Again, it's a really simple example of how tension is created in the small moments of the movie. Now, there's also one more tension-creating technique that the writers have used, and that is that they force Cal to act in a way that conflicts with his wants and his beliefs. So Cal openly tells Jacob that he loves his wife and that she is the only woman that he's ever loved and will ever love. And we know that he wants to reconcile with Emily. Now, despite this, Jacob offers to teach Cal about picking up women, and Cal agrees. Cal self-sabotages with clumsy, half-hearted attempts to pick up, but eventually he's successful, right? However, despite impressing Emily with his newfound confidence, he actually increases the distance between them when she finds out what he's been up to. Now, there are more examples of medium and high tension points in this movie, but what I want you to take away from this week's episode is that tension can be created by characters making dumb decisions. You can create secrets in situations where characters have information that they don't want others to find out. And you can make characters go against their values and their beliefs. All right, Valerie, how did you go this week?
Well, this was interesting this week. It's different than the movies we've studied so far. So this season, I am studying a topic called the 4 story questions, or at least that's what I call it. And, I say this every week, and it is true. This is really foundational stuff. So I strongly encourage you to know the answers to these questions in your own work in progress. All right. The questions are: 1, who is the protagonist? 2, what does he want? This is his object of desire. 3, what or who is standing in the way of him getting what he wants. This is the force or forces of antagonism. And 4, what happens if he doesn't get what he wants? This is the stakes. So Crazy Stupid Love is a multiple point of view, multi-plot story, which means there are more than one protagonist. So Cal is the main protagonist because remember, everything in story exists in a hierarchy. But he's not the only one. There's also Robbie, Jessica, and Hannah. Now, I don't see Emily or Jacob as protagonists, and in a few minutes, I'll explain why I think that. But here's what I want you to remember. If you are writing a story with more than one protagonist, you need to be able to answer these 4 story questions for each protagonist. Because if a character is important enough in your story to have a point of view, then they get their own storyline, right? Having a character having his own point of view elevates him dramatically in the story. If you cannot answer the 4 story questions for each of your POV characters, their storylines are going to suffer a lot. And as a result, your narrative is going to suffer. Also remember that in a multi-plot story, you will have less time to devote to each storyline because the overall length of your novel can't change. You still need to get it in around that 90,000 word mark, give or take. So if the various plots are going to make sense, if they're going to capture your reader's attention and hold it all the way to the end of the book, at a bare minimum, you have to address these 4 story questions. Your reader must clearly know who each of the protagonists are, like beyond a shadow of a doubt. The reader needs to know what each of these characters wants, what or who is standing in the way of each of these characters getting their various wants, and what's at stake, like what will happen if these various characters do not get what they want. That's a minimum. All right, so let's take a look at Crazy Stupid Love. The first protagonist, the main protagonist, as I said, is Cal Weaver. He is a middle-aged man whose wife has blindsided him by asking for a divorce. He's a terrific dad, and his kids love him. Cal is almost entirely passive, though, in this story. The one big proactive thing that he does happens as the inciting incident of the ending payoff at 1 hour and 25 minutes into the film. And that's when he builds the windmill mini golf thing for the backyard, and that's his effort to win back Emily. Now, what does Cal want? This is his object of desire. For most of the film, it is unclear what Cal wants, what he exactly wants, because he's not actively going after anything. So, like Macon in The Accidental Tourist, and we did a deep dive into this in season 5, episode 3, Cal is in shock, right? His wife has just asked for a divorce and he has shut down. This is exactly the same setup as The Accidental Tourist. Macon has shut down because his wife has just asked for a divorce, and Macon is also blindsided. And if you listen to that episode, you will remember that Macon is also a passive protagonist. So for most of the movie, Cal is just following along. He's doing what Jacob tells him to do. As the story approaches the final act, though, Cal decides to make a grand romantic gesture, and that is at his son's urging. This grand romantic gesture in an effort to win back his wife, Emily. So at that point, he does have a very clear object of desire that he proactively goes after. Cal wants, as Melanie said, he wants to reconcile with Emily. He wants his wife back. He wants his life back. Now, what or who is standing in the way of Cal getting what he wants? You know, who or what is the antagonist in the story? Well, it's Emily. Emily Weaver is the antagonist because she doesn't want to get back with him. But, and Melanie, you already said this, I have in my notes that Cal is also sabotaging himself. Having sex with 9 women does not help his case with Emily. It will not repair the rift. Just by the by. So what happens if Cal does not get what he wants? So in other words, what's at stake for Cal here? because he doesn't have a clear object of desire for most of the story, he's sort of in shock. Like I said, he's in limbo. He's just allowing himself to be led around. It therefore means that the stakes for Cal are also unclear. Like, what will happen to him if he fails to reunite with Emily? Will his life spiral out of control? We don't know. Will he be able to get his act together and maybe meet somebody else if he wants to and still have a great relationship with his kids? We don't know that either. It's not even on the cards in this story. It's not referenced or alluded to in any way. As I said, his object of desire doesn't kick in until, the movie's almost over. It's 3/4 over before that kicks in. So it's just not part of the story. Now, Melanie, you also said, and I picked up on, that at the end of the movie, Cal and Emily are at least comfortable in each other's company. There doesn't seem to be any animosity between them. Or if there is, they're able to manage it for the sake of their children because they're at their son's graduation. Will they reconcile? It's not clear, but at a minimum, it looks like they will be able to have some sort of positive relationship moving forward. A respectful relationship and all that good stuff. Okay, so the next protagonist that I have listed is actually Robbie Weaver, who's their 13-year-old son. And he has a crush on his babysitter, Jessica. Now, Robbie's object of desire is crystal clear, and it's made known like the second he enters the story. He wants to date Jessica. Now, who or what is standing in the way of this happening? Well, Jessica herself. She's the antagonist because she's not interested. And besides, he's 13 and she's 17. So apparently she thinks he is too young to date, but not too young to give nude photos to. That part of the plot was weird. I'm just going to say, I thought it was weird. Jessica, I think, needs therapy. So what or who stands in the way? So what happens if Robbie doesn't get what he wants? In other words, what's at stake for Robbie? Well, he'll have a broken heart if he's not able to date Jessica. He does become cynical for a little bit, but really the broken heart is at stake here. Like the audience doesn't really believe that he's going to become cynical permanently. He's just lashing out because he's hurting in that moment. Now, then we have Jessica, who is her own protagonist with her own storyline. She is 17. She is the babysitter for the Weavers, and she has a crush on Cal. So what does Jessica want? Well, she wants to have a sexual relationship with Cal. What or who's standing in the way of her getting it? Well, in other words, what's the antagonist or force of antagonism? Well, first of all, it's Cal, but he doesn't even realize it because he's completely unaware that she has any sort of crush on him. To him, she's just the babysitter. But also there's society's attitudes in there, right? It's not an appropriate thing. Jessica knows it, that he's way too old. And she's also the daughter of their best buds, right? And Cal sees her as a child. She's one of the kids. She is not a woman that he would date. And even the women that he picks up in the bar are not that young. They are, older women who are at least 35. So what happens if Jessica does not get what she wants? What happens to her? What's at stake for her if she does not get to have a sexual relationship with Cal? Now, this is really interesting because in this case, the stakes are much higher for Jessica if she does get what she wants, right? If she does actually have a sexual relationship with Cal, that's a big deal, right? That's not cool. That there's a lot of ramifications there if she is able to seduce him somehow. If she doesn't get it, she'll actually be much better off, right? It will just have been a private crush that that even if she doesn't know it in the moment, in maybe even in 6 months' time, but certainly as she gets a little older, she will understand that it was a simple crush and it happens to a lot of people and she'll be just fine. So in this case, the stakes are higher if she does get what she wants, not if she doesn't get what she wants. And I found that a really interesting aspect of this story. Okay. The last protagonist is Hannah, also known as Nana. She is the Weaver's oldest daughter. So, what does she want? Well, again, it's unclear exactly what Hannah wants. Now, she does assume that her boyfriend Richard is going to propose, but it's not clear that she wants him to. In fact, when her bestie specifically asks her this question, she doesn't answer it. When it turns out that he offers her a job, and it's not an offer of marriage, but an offer of employment, she gets really angry. But what she seems to be angry about is that Richard doesn't see her as marriage worthy. She's not necessarily angry because she desperately wanted to marry him and he rejected her, because she doesn't seem to particularly want to marry him. She gets insulted because he doesn't see her as wife material, right? The only proactive thing that Hannah does is actually right after that scene, she leaves that scene where she has been offered the job. And then she goes back to the bar where Jacob hit on her earlier in the film. And she actively goes to find him so that she can have revenge sex. Now, what or who is standing in the way of Hannah getting revenge sex with Jacob? Well, not a thing. Not one thing. She walks into the bar, Jacob sees her, and he is all in, and he's all in very quickly. There is zero obstacles to her getting him in the sack. Zero. There is a moment when she feels self-conscious when, we see his abs and stuff, and she's like, well, I'm not taking off my clothes, not with what you got going on over there. But really, if she wants to have, if that is still her object of desire, she's got no problem getting it. All right. So then we come to the stakes. So what happens if Hannah does not get to have sex with Jacob in this part of the movie? Well, like Jessica, there's actually more at stake for Hannah if she does get what she wants. If she had gone to the bar and Jacob hadn't been there, she'd have gone home. And yes, her ego would have been bruised and she would have still felt insulted that Richard didn't see her as marriage worthy, but she'd have bounced back. No problem. It would have been a momentary sort of one evening of feeling sorry for herself. And the next morning she would have been just fine. Right? But she does get what she wants, which means that now what's at stake is her being in a relationship where she can get her heart broken. Then it might, a future might be at stake. Like a happily ever after, if that's what she wants, might be at stake, or she could get her heart broken again. Like once the relationship kicks in, then there's all kinds of interesting things that could happen. But in saying all of that, the reality is that in this movie, this storyline is not fleshed out enough for us to really have much of a conversation. Hannah doesn't have a clear object of desire. There are no clear stakes. So this is a pretty thin storyline that I'm really squeezing blood out of a turnip here. All right. So this brings me to Emily Weaver and Jacob, the two characters who I said I do not see as protagonists. Let me tell you why. Emily is the antagonist for Cal's storyline. Right in the very first scene, I think it's the first scene of the movie, Cal and Emily are having dinner. We find out right there that Emily wants a divorce. And you know what? She gets it immediately with no opposition. And this is all in the first couple of minutes of the movie. Cal, he says, after he jumps out of the moving car, he says, I will move out immediately and you can have whatever you want. Just stop talking. Because of that, because there's no opposition, there's really no clear stakes for her either. Again, I mean, you could try to stretch it out logically, and say, well, if he hadn't granted the divorce, there's potentially a life of being unhappy. That might be steak for her, whatever. But that's really reading in an awful lot of stuff into a movie that is not that deep. It's not designed for it. I don't say that as a criticism at all, because we don't always want deep, heavy movies we got to plow through. This is a lighthearted film. So Emily's storyline is not that deep. She is there to serve Cal's storyline. Jacob, same idea. Jacob's main role in this film is how he influences Cal's storyline, because Cal, after all, is the main protagonist. Jacob is Cal's mentor. He helps Cal, quote, rediscover his manhood, whatever that means, I don't know. And he is Hannah's boyfriend. So him being Hannah's boyfriend is a complication to Cal's storyline. Now, you could argue that what Jacob wants is a real relationship, not just a sexual one. But again, that's really squeezing blood out of a turnip, because there's just not enough in his storyline to take it any further than that. He has that line there where he asks Hannah to, ask me something about myself, right? So clearly he's searching for a relationship that's a little deeper than the ones he's been having. That's all we know. Really, that's all we know. So the key thing to remember here is this. If you are writing a multi-POV story, then you need to be able to answer those 4 story questions for each of your POV characters. And you have to clearly convey these to your reader in a limited time, because each of your storylines is condensed, because the overall length of your novel can't get any longer. You're still working with the same roughly 90,000 word count for your overall story, but now you got to tell 2, 3, 4 storylines, however many POV characters you have. Anyway, that's all I have today. Melanie, what's the action step?
All right. Well, today I want you to look at your story and identify points where you could get your characters to make dumb decisions, and then write that and see if it creates more tension.
Well, that wraps it up for this week. Join us again next week when we discuss Judy. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review, and tell your writer friends about us. For access to writing templates and worksheets and more than 70 hours of training, subscribe to my Inner Circle by visiting valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. If you'd like to get Melanie's tips about books to help you read like a writer, visit her on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Melanie Hill Author, or find out more about her at melaniehill.au. And remember, story theory does not have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.